So it's really great to be joined by my two colleagues here who are exceptional to discuss one of the most important issues, I think, that our state, and for that fact the nation, actually faces. And of course to have Dr. Lindsay here as well, who is just such an expert in this field. But above all, I'm thrilled to have all of you, because what we are going to do here, I believe, is listen. And if you can't lead unless you listen. And if there was ever a issue in which listening is so important, it's this one. It's appropriate because when it comes to mental health, listening, I think, is one of the most important things that we can do. By listening to each other, we start to bring down the walls that divide us. Walls that sometimes we put up ourselves because of the stigma that saying I have a mental health challenge often has. And it isn't, asking for help isn't easy. In fact, sometimes it requires immense bravery and courage to reach out and admit to others, I'm not okay. But when we foster an environment of listening, we make it easier for others to get there. We make it easier for them to get the treatment they need. And getting that treatment is something I know we want to talk about, because that's one of our challenges in this society, the access to that treatment in a timely fashion. But by listening, by talking openly and honestly about things like depression, anxiety, loneliness, we start to peel back the curtain. So we start to let people know it's okay not to be okay. Now, it's also fitting that we're doing this in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we need to make it more than a month's challenge. It's an annual challenge as far as I'm concerned. But it's also a moment to recognize the landmark bill that the Congresswoman has authored, the Pursuing Equity in Mental Health Act, which I'm proud to be the Senate sponsor of. As you heard the doctor say, it provides for nearly $1 billion. I noticed that she made it $995 million, so it's sort of like they didn't round up to $1 billion, but it's pretty close to that amount of money. And it is part of the reality of the challenge we need. But beyond the money, it's about a particular focus on closing disparity gaps among different groups. We talk about black and brown communities, but LGBTQ communities, those who have faced gun violence, and others equally need this type of help. And for too long, it has gone underfunded. The fact is that despite laws on the book that mandate parity, which I have voted for, between physical and mental health programs, despite the fact that communities of color struggle with mental health at equal, if not greater rates than others, there still exists drastic gaps in both how we diagnose and treat mental health in black and brown communities. And there's an enormous amount of stigma associated with seeking assistance for mental health, which brings me to the reason we're here. If we know the task at hand, if we take steps to address it, then today's listening session is also about not only taking away the challenge, but also the opportunities, understanding best practices, understanding how those of you who are practitioners and or community advocates have seen the ability to have some success that we should be able to replicate across the country. Strategies that put patients first and provide culturally competent treatment. I'll close by saying last year I conducted in Hackensack a similar roundtable, but it was focused on youth mental health. We heard from students and parents and counselors and experts, all of whom talked about the last few years that has been mentioned here, and the subsequent lack of access to care having significantly affected them. I'm going to date myself, but when I grew up, it was an air raid drill. You put your head under the desk because the Russians were going to bomb. But today is an active shooters drill. And to listen to young people, I have 4 grandchildren, and to listen to my eldest grandchild, Evangelina, named after my late mother, that Grandpa, we had an active shooters drill. I said, what does that mean? And she said, well, we had to basically get down and hide from somebody who might come in and shoot. Evangelina's 6 years old. So if that's where we're at in that regard, and of course the pandemic the learning loss that took place in the pandemic, which we need to address as well. All of these things make it, in my mind, a national imperative. And that's why we're here, to listen and then to go to work to make that national imperative challenge be met. I sit on the Senate Finance Committee that deals with healthcare and the resources for healthcare. So I look forward to being an ally to the angel to see if we can get this done. Thank you very much.